Few policies better illustrate the gap between political intentions and real-world consequences than cashless bail. Advocates argue it is a reform of compassion, a way to keep non-violent, low-income defendants from languishing in jail simply because they cannot afford bail. That may sound like a noble mission, but in practice, cashless bail often represents yet another example of policymakers ignoring human nature, incentives, and empirical evidence, all while making life more dangerous for law-abiding citizens. The fundamental premise of bail is not to punish, but to ensure that a defendant returns to court to face charges. Money bail works because it creates a tangible stake for the accused, and often for their family or bail bondsman in showing up. The posting of bail aligns incentives. The court wants the defendant present, and the defendant wants their money back. Cashless bail removes that stake. Without a financial penalty for skipping court, the primary deterrent to flight is a future arrest warrant, a prospect that many habitual offenders do not find especially intimidating. Moreover, when a person can walk out of jail within hours of arrest, regardless of their record, they face little disruption and little reason to change their behavior. The predictable result has been a revolving door of criminal activity. In jurisdictions where cashless bail has been adopted, it is not uncommon for the same individuals to be arrested, released, and arrested again, sometimes within days or even hours. In New York, after bail reform took effect in 2020, police reported numerous cases in which suspects committed additional crimes almost immediately after release. One man was arrested 3 times in one day. These are not isolated anecdotes. They are the inevitable result of a system that removes meaningful consequences. Supporters of cashless bail argue that most defendants show up for their court dates and that the truly dangerous can still be held without bail. But such arguments ignore 2 realities. First, dangerousness is often defined so narrowly in these reforms that many repeat offenders still qualify for immediate release. Second, while it is true that many defendants do return to court, the risk posed by those who don't, or who commit new crimes while awaiting trial, is borne entirely by the public, not by those making the policy. This is where the issue of incentives becomes most important. A defendant with a record of multiple arrests for theft, assault, or drug dealing may see release as simply part of the process. Without the friction of bail, the criminal justice system signals that society has a high tolerance for lawbreaking. That message reverberates not just to the individual, but to the community, eroding respect for law and undermining deterrence. Nor is the problem limited to violent crime. Property crimes, car thefts, and retail theft have surged in some cashless bail jurisdictions. Businesses in these areas face mounting losses, often passing costs onto customers or simply closing their doors. Residents are left to bear the costs of increased insurance premiums, diminished public safety, and declining quality of life. The most tragic irony is that the communities most harmed by these policies are often the very ones policymakers claim to help. Poor and working-class neighborhoods suffer disproportionately from crime. When repeat offenders are quickly cycled back into the streets, it is the shop owner in a struggling neighborhood, the single mother walking home from work, and the child walking to school who bear the brunt. Bail reform advocates often frame the debate as one between fairness and oppression, as if the choice is between jailing poor people for minor offenses or embracing a humane, enlightened system. But such a framing ignores alternatives that balance fairness with public safety. Judges can and do exercise discretion to reduce or eliminate bail for truly low-risk first-time offenders. Pretrial services, electronic monitoring, and other measures can ensure appearance in court without turning the streets into open-air holding cells for the criminally inclined. The insistence on sweeping one-size-fits-all cashless bail policies reflects a broader problem, the tendency of political actors to value symbolism over substance. It is easy to pose as a champion of the underdog by railing against wealth-based detention. It is harder to acknowledge that some individuals, regardless of income, pose real risks to others, and that releasing them without consequence is a dereliction of duty. Like many well-intentioned policies, cashless bail rests on a flawed assumption that the problem lies in the system rather than in human behavior. But the system exists precisely because human behavior is imperfect. The founders understood this, which is why they designed checks and balances in government. The same principle applies to criminal justice. Checks and balances on individual behavior are necessary for the preservation of liberty. A society without meaningful consequences for lawbreaking is not more free. It is more dangerous, especially for the law-abiding. Cashless bail treats crime as an inconvenience to be processed, rather than a threat to be deterred. It shifts the burden from those who break the law to those who follow it. And, as is so often the case, the costs are not paid by the policymakers who champion it, but by the citizens who must live with the results. Real reform does not mean releasing everyone without bail. It means creating a system that is fair, efficient, and capable of distinguishing between those who can safely await trial in the community and those who cannot. That requires judgment, discretion, and a willingness to prioritize public safety over mindless virtue signaling. In the end, the question is not whether we care about fairness in the justice system. Of course we do. The question is whether fairness includes the right of ordinary citizens to live without fear of repeat offenders cycling endlessly through the courts. True compassion is not measured by how quickly we can release an accused criminal, but by how well we protect the innocent. If that principle is lost, then so too is the very justice that bail, cash or otherwise, was designed to secure.
The Moral Superiority of Liberty, by Jim Cardoza. Welcome to a thought-provoking exploration of freedom and governance. In Essays on Liberty and Governance, dive deep into the complexities of laissez-faire capitalism, socialism, and the challenges of crony capitalism. Explore critical issues like government overreach, the war on cash, and the role of the press in a surveillance society. From the Second Amendment to drug legalization, this collection champions personal freedom and challenges the status quo. Get your copy now. Available on Amazon.